Eric Rios versus James Katsaros. Both these players, like you mentioned, we've already seen on stream in the past, but it's going to be really exciting to watch how these two teams match up against each other.
Yeah, and so much pressure going into this. Looks like we are about to get started. Of course, Eric representing Spain and James representing Australia. We see the teams, we've seen them yesterday, and yeah, you know, the talk of this tournament really feels like this core of Tyranitar, Excadrill, Togekiss, which, you know, people were using since day one of the format, and then it felt like people started moving away towards it, but a lot of top players decided, you know what, I'm just going to stick with what I think is really good. So you know, pretty similar teams here. Obviously, both teams also have an Arcanine. Now, Eric has the Corviknight, which I think will actually be really essential in dealing with the opposing Togekiss, Excadrill, Tyranitar combination. And for James's end, this is where Rotom Wash might come in handy, but of course, Eric does have the Gastrodon, which can support Corviknight. And just everything else that's weak to water types. Now, of course, Rotom can still hit the Corviknight with electric type attacks, but you have double switch-ins into Gastrodon and Excadrill, which can take a potential Thunderbolt or Max Lightning from the Rotom Wash.
And I think it's really interesting that you point out just how early on, you know, the Togekiss, Excadrill, and Tyranitar core sort of developed in the metagame. That was also about the time when Corviknight started rising as well.
Yeah.
Corviknight has such a strong matchup against that core, depending on which type of Corviknight we're going to see. You know, earlier on we saw the bulk up variant that had, you know, flying type attacks and a steel type attacks. You know, steel type matches up very well against the Togekiss and the Tyranitar. Does get access to fighting type attacks as well to match up well against Excadrill. So we'll have to see how those Pokemon match up this time around.
I think how both players play with their Excadrill is going to be absolutely essential in this matchup, and I'm not surprised to see it come out immediately as a lead for either, but James maybe getting a little bit better end of the trade-off here with the immediate Intimidate. We actually see the Mold Breaker from Eric's Excadrill, but not James's, which is a big deal. It means that James can maybe consider bringing Tyranitar to guarantee that it outspeeds the opposing Excadrill.
Yeah, Eric is still running the Tyranitar alongside Excadrill, but opted for the Mold Breaker, of course. Makes it a much stronger choice against a Pokemon like a Rotom that relies on its ability to avoid those ground-type attacks. But in this mirror, definitely going to be at a disadvantage.
Yeah, you know, I have to wonder which Excadrill is faster between the two here, whether they speed tie. Because dynamic of any time you're going up against the same Pokemon, if you are, you know, for example, max speed and you're able to just outspeed the opposing Pokemon, it's a really big deal. But if, you know, given that this is Mold Breaker Excadrill, we often see something like Swords Dance here, so perhaps we might see something like a Follow Me Swords Dance on turn 1 immediately. Togekiss is actually going to switch in here for James's end to, you know, potentially redirect future attacks, especially a Max Quake.
Yeah, just going to match the Togekiss Excadrill on both sides of the field as our players are deciding to Dynamax immediately. So another turn 1 Dynamax here from Excadrill. Going to be a huge threat offensively if it's able to catch either the Togekiss or the Excadrill with a super effective attack. Looks like it's going to be matched by Eric as well.
Yeah, so Eric opting to also Dynamax here despite the Intimidate, doesn't go for something like a Swords Dance, so just wants to get damage off, but...
Ooh, the Togekiss, actually.
Oh, yeah, okay, so that I think makes a lot more sense there. You know, that obviously doesn't care about the Intimidate. If you've got Babiri Berry, you can definitely take a Steel-type attack from the opposing Excadrill, so see what the items are here. And there's the Swords Dance!
So Eric going to go ahead and nullify that Intimidate with the Swords Dance, brings it up to +1. While James just firing off a Max Steel Spike into the Dynamax Togekiss. Should be able to take that pretty comfortably thanks to the Babiri Berry. So comfortably. Like barely even scratching the Togekiss. Does get those defense boosts though onto the Togekiss and Excadrill on James's side, which means that the Excadrill, even though it's boosted, may not be able to do a lot of damage. But you know what can deal damage? Max Flare from Togekiss. Yeah,
Max Flare there, kind of a cool option as well because it also covers the Tyranitar switch in where you'll reset the weather, and we actually saw that Eric's Excadrill got the Swords Dance off before James's Excadrill attack, so still don't know if it's a speed tie or not, but that might give some knowledge to both of the players. We'll have to see whether it is actually a speed tie or not. And I mean, I wonder if a Max Steel Spike will even knock out Togekiss from this range. It's pretty close. I mean, that wasn't Life Orb Excadrill either, so not getting that extra damage boost, you know, is really critical. But there's one way to get around it. Yeah, Helping Hand.
Are you just a little bit short of damage? Let Togekiss lend you a helping hand. Max Steel Spike from Excadrill, actually enough to pick up the KO thanks to the boost from Helping Hand on Togekiss. A second defense boost for both the Excadrill and Togekiss. Again, means that even though Eric was able to get up a Swords Dance to counteract the Intimidate and go positive on attack, still going to be pretty bulky. This Earthquake will hit super effective damage on the Excadrill, but not enough to pick up the KO after 2 defense boosts.
Yeah, that's an excellent play there by James. We've seen a lot of different Togekiss movesets, and Helping Hand is one of those moves that isn't as common as some other options, but super good. And wow, I mean, Eric's bringing in Tyranitar here, which means James's Excadrill now is guaranteed to outspeed both Tyranitar and Excadrill on Eric's side. So Eric's not out of it yet, despite losing his Dynamax Pokemon first, but it definitely feels like somewhat of an uphill battle because, of course, James does have that Arcanine in the back. You could switch Togekiss out into Arcanine. Could even go for something like a Helping Hand and maybe a Max Steel Spike just to knock out Tyranitar. But, of course, you don't want to leave Excadrill unchecked on Eric's end, especially because you've seen that Swords Dance. You can't let it just get a Swords Dance off and maybe sweep through.
Yeah.
So, James has to keep that in mind. Might want to shuffle in some Intimidates, but for now it looks like, wow, just staying in with both Pokemon and attacking.
Just staying in with both Pokemon, no Protects or anything, so Tyranitar just gets knocked out by that Max Quake. Super effective damage from Excadrill on James's side. And, all that Tyranitar did was switch in and give the Excadrill a speed boost and now a special defense boost. As even just the Iron Head, no Babiri Berry or anything, Togekiss able to tank that comfortably, but tragically flinches from the Iron Head.
Yeah, and Excadrill is still around. Like you said, Tyranitar's purpose here was just to set up the sand, basically, which doesn't really help Eric at all. So James's Dynamax now ends, but he's still going to be faster because of the sand, and this is kind of the awkward matchup when you have Tyranitar and Excadrill. A little even more awkward for Eric because his Excadrill doesn't have Sand Rush. So Gastrodon is definitely a really solid Pokemon in this matchup, though, and it's something that I think could really wall a lot of the things, especially if it has the Recover. So even despite being down 2-4, I think Eric could pull this back with Gastrodon and Excadrill, but he's going to have to conserve the Excadrill, which is why he's going for a Protect here.
All right, just another Earthquake coming out from James's Excadrill into the Protect. Will deal good damage to the Gastrodon, but of course, James does not have any boosts on, any offensive boosts on his Excadrill, so just gonna deal a little bit of damage there. Gonna have to rely on this Dazzling Gleam to get Gastrodon down into a more reasonable hit point area, but Skull's just gonna pick up that KO.
Yeah, and James still has the Arcanine in the back as well as a 4th Pokemon. So for me, once again, the big question is what kind of set, or first of all, what the 4th Pokemon is. If it's something like Dragapult, that'll be able to do a lot of damage to Gastrodon. You always have to think about Gastrodon endgames where you have to ask yourself, okay, am I doing enough damage to mitigate Recover every turn, basically? Arcanine's not going to be able to do very much damage, but here the Intimidate will obviously help out immensely against the Excadrill. Excadrill should not be able to get a one-hit KO onto the opposing Arcanine. Can go for something like a Flare Blitz, but the other thing here is if you do have like a Focus Sash on Excadrill, then you can take any Fire-type attack from that Arcanine, maybe knock out the Togekiss with an Iron Head, and then Gastrodon can click Recover here. So this is one of the reasons why Gastrodon is, prioritized pretty heavily as a defensive Pokemon, because a lot of end games, like, players are just kind of unprepared for it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, James doesn't have great ways to deal damage with it right now. Might need a critical hit onto it. Oh, here's Heat Wave from Arcanine.
Okay, Heat Wave's going to deal spread damage, deals good damage to Excadrill, does not knock it down, doesn't create a KO though. Iron Head connects with Togekiss, picks up that KO, deals just a little bit of chip the Heat Wave did onto Gastrodon. Just going to fire back with an Earth Power, not opting to recover. Just going to get some damage onto Arcanine, maybe helping out the Excadrill in the future, pick up a KO. Now it really comes down to what this 4th Pokemon is for James. He kind of let his foot up off the gas, but Dragapult is here to like stomp it all the way back down. Yeah,
I think that Dragapult will ensure the game here now for James. Should be able to outspeed both Gastrodon and Excadrill. And you can see the downside of running Mold Breaker Excadrill here. Things like Arcanine can outspeed you, and most Arcanines are like typically max speed and max HP invested. So now it's a pretty safe play. You go for Heat Wave, and I think Eric's only out is a potential Heat Wave miss onto that Excadrill.
All right, Dragon Claw into the Protect, so no more special Dragapults here, just going to go for the physical Dragon Claw. Heat Wave connects, no miss here, picks up the KO onto Excadrill, and now the Gastrodon usually likes to tank hits, but doesn't like to tank Dragon Claws from Dragapult.
Gastrodon's one of those Pokemon where you really want to like knock out all the heavy hitters, and Dragapult actually with that Life Orb and Dragon Claw is one of them. Because Pokemon like Arcanine are a lot more passive. Something like Rotom, for example, is a little bit more passive as well. So just going for the double protect, trying to stall things out. But
trying to buy some time.
yeah, you know, if you get it, you get more time to think about what your next move is going to be, right, going into the second game. So I think at first I was a little bit surprised to not see the Corviknight come out from Eric's end, but the more I think about it, the more I can see some reason, given that what James had in the back, especially given that it is Heatwave Arcanine, which Eric might have known about. I think we saw yesterday that this Dragapult also has the Max Flare, so it makes it a little bit more difficult to bring Corviknight. But the main thing for Eric here is that he basically wasn't able to deal with James's Excadrill well enough, especially because Eric brought the Tyranitar, which set up the sand and allowed James to just outspeed. As we saw, Eric's Excadrill was moving first before that. So I think if you go back to the drawing board, you have to consider, okay, do I even bring in Tyranitar? If so, how am I going to play properly with it?
Yeah, and I think the other big thing, the big difference between these two teams in that last game was James brought that Arcanine as well.
Yeah.
Getting that Intimidate off turn 1 meant that, Eric's Excadrill was just always a little bit behind in terms of offensive pressure. Meant it had to spend that turn Swords Dancing before being able to Dynamax. Did not Dynamax, Togekiss did instead. While James was able to get off a very valuable Dynamax from Excadrill, got 2 defense boosts from 2 Steel Spikes and a special defense boost from the Max Quake.
Yeah, so, going back to the drawing board, have to ask, okay, how do you approach the opposing Excadrill? And I think it still starts with, your own Excadrill on Eric's end, but perhaps setting up, as we saw, James did not even end up bringing his own Tyranitar in that game, right? So maybe you speed tie at worst, but at least that's like a 50-50. Can maybe consider even going for like a turn 1 Swords Dance with Excadrill and then Dynamax it. Like the thing was that Eric basically didn't get very much mileage off his Dynamax Togekiss. The only thing he did was get that Max Flare off. And we know now that James's Togekiss has that helping hand, so you have to play around a little bit like from those damage calculations. So I think Eric's Excadrill's a great candidate to Dynamax because if you look at it after a Swords Dance, it gets a one-hit KO pretty much on everything on James's end. Obviously, it's easier said than done because it can get outsped by the opposing Excadrill if James brings in Tyranitar, and there is the threat of Intimidate from Arcanine as well. But I think it still might be worth considering going down that route. The other problem was that Gastrodon for Eric in that last game just wasn't able to do anything other than get a Scald off. And it looks like a good Pokemon in this matchup, but James does have a lot of heavy offense you have to play around.
Scald's still a little bit more than the Tyranitar got to do last game, though, at least.
Yeah, definitely.
Looks like we are going to see James leading the Arcanine and Excadrill again, but this time Eric has swapped out, bringing his own Arcanine alongside Togekiss this time. This time, Eric has gotten the Intimidate off onto the opposing Excadrill.
I really like the adjustment here by Eric. Leading Excadrill doesn't really offer too much because you're threatened so much by the opposing Arcanine, which now has Heat Wave as well as the opposing Excadrill. So by bringing Arcanine, you get that initial Intimidate off against James's Excadrill. You threaten it with a Will-O-Wisp immediately, but can also bait out and just switch in, which is what he's going for. And there's Corviknight, which I expected to see in that first game.
All right, making the adjustment, a couple of adjustments here, bringing the Corviknight this time. James retreats Excadrill in favor of his own Togekiss. So now Togekiss Arcanine on the field for James. One turn behind what Eric was playing. But we are going to see the Dynamax coming out here again this time.
Yeah, so it looks like it is going to be the Togekiss that's Dynamaxing. So Eric sticking to it, and it makes sense, I think, because this time around you do have the Intimidate for the opposing Excadrill. So getting that Intimidate off means Togekiss survives a lot longer, even with helping hand support. And yeah, you can go for some max airstreams, and if there's one thing that, Togekiss doesn't care about if you're Scope Lens, it's special attack drops, because you're getting a critical hit 50% of the time anyway.
Yeah. And interesting on the switch in there, Corviknight showing its mirror armor, actually reflecting back the special attack drop onto James's Arcanine. Actually might be important since we've already seen the Heat Wave coming out there, defending the Corviknight from any kind of fire type attacks from that Arcanine, as Togekiss boosts the speed with the max airstream.
Yeah, no critical hit there, but I misspoke there a little bit. Of course, we saw it is Babiri Berry on Togekiss. Often these Togekisses will run Super Luck, even if, it is Babiri Berry, so your chance of critting, obviously, not super high. But that speed boost is a big deal, and Corviknight, I think, is the Pokemon that Eric actually really wants to center this gameplay around if he's able to knock out the Arcanine, especially if James brought the same Pokemon. And I think for James's end, he might want to consider like a late game Dragapult Dynamax, but it looks like he's actually going to just use Dynamax immediately here. Wonder if it's just the Arcanine to try to snipe Corviknight.
No, this is not a late game Dragapult. This is a turn 3 Arcanine.
Very interesting.
Dynamax. Has taken a snarl though from the mirror armor,
Right.
so not going to be dealing as much damage as you even though it's not offensive, you still would expect it to deal a little bit more damage with the help of this helping hand.
Yep. So this is not the first time we've seen a more support-oriented Arcanine Dynamax,
Yeah.
and you can see how players are clever with their Dynamax decisions here. We'll see if the helping hand and Max Flare is able to knock out the Corviknight here, assuming that is the target.
All right, another max airstream means Corviknight gets to hide behind its shield, boost its defense with that iron defense. Not going to help it against the special max flare from Arcanine. Going to have to rely on the snarl that it bounced back. It does survive. 42 hit points. Good damage coming out from the max flare, but that snarl really hurting. With that helping hand, you really wanted to see that KO.
Yeah, it shows you, I mean, why Arcanine, especially when support-oriented, isn't Dynamax very often. And yeah, the Snarl Mirror Armor interaction is super interesting. We don't see that very often, but big game difference here. And yeah, it's a great switch in there by Eric, I think, because James is going to be tempted to just go into another Max Flare, and Arcanine very rarely even carries any other offensive attacks if it's so supportive like we've seen here. So you can switch in Tyranitar to take the Max Flare pretty easily and just waste another turn of Dynamax on James's end, while also boosting speed potentially with the Max Airstream.
Yep, another max airstream as James follows me with his own Togekiss, means that a little bit of damage is going to spread, and Tyranitar on the switch-in going to get this speed boost. Togekiss at +3 now after having used 3 of those. And the switch-in to the Max Flare, really great too, because it allows Eric to get Tyranitar in without setting the sand.
Yes.
Sun now out from James's Max Flare means that the Excadrill can't switch in and just make use of Eric's Tyranitar sand.
Yeah, and now you've got, super fast Togekiss that hasn't taken any damage yet, as well as Tyranitar at +1 speed, so you could pretty easily go for something like just Dazzling Gleam Rock Slide right now for free damage. It really covers all of the options here. We haven't seen the full attacks from both Pokemon yet, but I think Eric's in an excellent position, and that's the downside of choosing to Dynamax Arcanine. If you choose to Dynamax it, then you better make sure you either get the knockout that you need or force the switch out that you need. In this case, it was really neither. I mean, you got some damage on a Corviknight, but I feel like Dragapult or Excadrill could have been a much better Dynamax candidate.
Oh, Heat Wave actually from Eric. Gets a critical hit on Togekiss, boosted by the Sun. Get a little bit more damage out. While James going to follow up with another Max Flare, just not dealing the damage that you want to see from your Dynamax Pokemon. Because of that snarl. Togekiss goes down to the Rock Slide. Arcanine's still hanging in there, going to eat its berry finally here. But, big damage coming out from Eric. Really good play there to get himself in this position.
Yeah, it feels like that was an opportunity for James maybe to have gone for a helping hand just to get some extra damage before it gets KO'd. But one other important interaction there is that the Arcanine is still faster than Tyranitar, even though Tyranitar got that +1 speed boost. That's not super surprising since Arcanines typically invest in max speed, but we saw the Heat Wave here on the Togekiss. The Sun is still up as well, so it'll do a ton of damage to the Arcanine and the Excadrill. It's not going to knock out either, I don't think. The big question I have here is how fast is Tyranitar now relative to Excadrill? Can it outspeed it with the speed boost?
Never mind.
Not with Tyranitar coming in, yeah.
James is like, I don't think I can get another game where Eric's just going to give me free sand.
Yep.
So let me make sure that I bring my Tyranitar this time. Switches in the Tyranitar, sets the sand to give the Excadrill speed boost, while Eric, correctly identifying that, switches out his own Tyranitar to get the Intimidate off onto both Excadrill and Tyranitar on James's side. This Iron Head is going to deal some damage to Togekiss, but still very healthy, still has the Babiri Berry, and Intimidated. Togekiss can tank it pretty easily. Doesn't flinch this time, so will connect with the Heat Wave onto both those Pokemon, dealing a little bit of damage to the Excadrill. Misses the Sun a lot. Gets a crit on the Tyranitar, though, for good measure.
Yeah, no burn there, though, which could have been absolutely huge on both of these physical-type attackers.
Yeah.
But I think nice play there by Eric to get a relatively free Intimidate off against both of these physical attackers. And now Excadrill probably won't even be able to knock out Arcanine, especially because it can't Dynamax. So Arcanine could just retaliate back with a Fire-type attack of its own and knock out the Excadrill. Maybe want to consider switching Togekiss out here for potential redirection in the future, but looks like it's just going to stay in. And I really like this Protect on Excadrill's end because, it's threatened so much. And it's actually Follow Me coming out here, so just to potentially redirect, like, a Ground-type attack. And
Will-O-Wisp connect with Tyranitar. Arcanine over here threatening the burn on both of these physical attackers. Correctly calls that Excadrill wants to protect this turn. Burns the Tyranitar, and because of the burn, not even enough to pick up the KO on the Togekiss with a critical hit. But fortunately, that sand is still up for James. Going to pick up that KO anyway.
Yeah, so Eric actually choosing to not target Excadrill there. You know, that play covers all your options. If Excadrill does go for an attack, it's often going to click Iron Head, but in case it clicks like Earthquake or High Horsepower, or if it's Earthquake, Follow Me doesn't do anything, but if it's High Horsepower, then you redirect that away. So I really like that. Corviknight comes out now, and Tyranitar really, I don't think should be able to KO. I'm not even sure Excadrill will be able to KO it, and if Corviknight gets a Roost off here, that's probably just game over. That's one of the reasons why Corviknight I thought was really good going into this matchup. And the other big question is Arcanine going to get KO'd by a ground type attack from the opposing Excadrill? It is intimidated, so Eric could consider swapping it out here. I think Corviknight, if it has Roost, might want to go for that. Could also just go for a body press. So definitely a lot of options, but that's a big burn and a big prediction there on Eric's end last turn, being able to get that burn onto Tyranitar, significantly reducing the damage output from that Rock Slide.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a big question of whether or not this Corviknight is going to be able to Roost and recover some of that health up. It took a lot of damage earlier on in the game. The Arcanine going to switch out to Preserve, Intimidate, just in case Eric needs it. Rock Slide connects with Tyranitar and Corviknight. Not enough. Only 21 hit
but
points.
there's Dark Pulse! It outspeeds Corviknight and gets the knockout. Wow.
What? Mixed Tyranitar.
That was a tech if I've seen one. Wow. Brilliant, brilliant play there by James.
Okay. You can burn me. I still got Dark Pulse. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it.
Wow, that was absolutely huge. And, you know, the other thing here is that Arcanine, by choosing to switch out, yeah, you get the Intimidate off, but Excadrill now can just switch out to reset that Intimidate. So a really critical reveal there with the Dark Pulse. I'm not sure a Crunch would have been able to knock out like the Corviknight, given the burn and the attack drop from Intimidate. So, wow, what a great tech there by James, and it pays off perfectly.
Yeah, making big plays here to win this match, which would guarantee James's spot in Top Cut a little bit later today. The last two Pokemon he has to get through are Eric Rios' Tyranitar and Arcanine. And you know Tyranitar has a good matchup, is very strong, able to take KOs on both of James's Pokemon. That sand is still up for Excadrill.
Yeah, and I think on James's end, you do have a relatively free switch in. You know, just withdraw the Excadrill as he's doing, go out into Arcanine, get the Intimidate off both, and then bring back the Excadrill back in. The thing that's actually kind of awkward right now, though, is that sand, I think, is expiring after this turn. And so if you don't knock out the Arcanine on Eric's end, then Arcanine can outspeed and just KO Excadrill. So how do you get the free switch in, basically, into Excadrill while sand, and have sand up as well?
Flare Blitz doing no damage after that Intimidate, and of course with the resistance. But Tyranitar also showing Earth Power. It's not mixed special, it's mixed physical.
Yeah, wow.
Earth Power and Dark Pulse onto Arcanine deals good damage. It recovers with Aguav Berry, so it's getting healthy again. Rock Slide will pick up the KO onto Arcanine, and Tyranitar takes a little bit more damage now. But like you mentioned, that Arcanine has gone down. Still taking some of the sand damage, though.
Yeah, what's huge here is actually there's one more turn of sand, and Excadrill gets to come back out. So if Eric does not have Protect on this Arcanine, it will just feint to an attack from the Excadrill. So we'll see. You have to see if Arcanine has Protect. If it does, you would imagine that you can just double Protect here and then go for you know, a Fire-type attack to knock out the Excadrill on the opposing side. I also have to wonder, you know, what moveset this Tyranitar has. Does it have something like a superpower which can actually knock out the Excadrill in one hit here? This is going to be a really, really close finish to the game. James, of course, does have the speed advantage. His Excadrill will be able to get a knockout. And on the Arcanine, the thing is, I'm not sure like an Iron Head, High Horsepower, or Earthquake will knock out the opposing Tyranitar. So, I mean, you could also just maybe go for like a superpower into the opposing Tyranitar, and it's going to be a Protect from James's Tyranitar.
Yeah, Tyranitar having to Protect here. I believe we've already seen the Earthquake from Excadrill. No damage onto the partner Tyranitar, but will do big damage to both the Tyranitar and Arcanine. Doesn't pick up the KO on Tyranitar, but deals a lot of damage back. KOs the Arcanine, activates the weakness policy on Tyranitar. So now Eric needs to pick up this KO here. Superpower.
Oh,
into
he targeted
the Protect!
Tyranitar. Wow.
Into Tyranitar, not the Excadrill. Tyranitar misses the opportunity to pick up a KO. And instead, Sand's just going to end, but James still in a commanding position with both the Tyranitar and Excadrill.
Yeah, so that's going to effectively lock up the game. James's Excadrill surely is faster, and we'll just get the knockout onto the opposing Tyranitar. And wow, I mean, the special Tyranitar here with Dark Pulse and Earth Power just doing so much damage to both the... First of all, they're knocking out the Corviknight, because I think if like it's not special Tyranitar there, Corviknight probably just gets a Roost off, and it's just so much harder to knock it out after then. So Eric ended up bringing Corviknight, but you can see how James has adapted his Tyranitar Excadrill team to actually have answers against Corviknight and against the Swords Dance Excadrill